Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast for Australia. First of all, just a quick apology. I was unable to get a video recorded late last week. I was traveling for work down in the southeastern part of the United States, and due to travel delays and some other issues, I was just unable to get you a video. So I thought I'd just put it off and give you one here on Sunday night here in the States and get you something for early Monday morning. But you've been looking at a picture of my family. While we were really very much stuck in the southeastern United States, we did stop at a mega gas station called the Buc-ee's. If you ever come to the U.S., you got to go to the Southeast. That's the only place where they are. They have like 150 gas pumps and a huge store. You can get really good barbecue in them, all sorts of other stuff. Well, anyway, that's what I look like. If you've never seen me or met me, there I am. This is my son. If you're curious what I look like when I was 12, that's exactly what I look like. That's my daughter, Amelia. She's about to become a sophomore in high school. Very proud of her, and my wife, Elena. We ran into Santa while we were down there, so get a good snapshot with him. Now, again, if you ever come to the Southeast, you got to go to a Buc-ee's. Okay, let's get into the real meat of what I want to discuss with you. We have been making a case for the last several videos that the jet stream level winds in their current configuration has been the dominant force in the pattern and is probably going to continue to be so. In other words, it's outdoing other things like the development of La Nina, like the movement around of the MJO. And during winter, we know this, right? We know we have to watch the jet stream level winds. But since, really the beginning of July, but this kind of goes through the middle and toward the end of July, we have just had this dominant trough of low pressure that's lived in this area. And what it's done is it's driven some much stronger winds across parts of Western Australia. If you just take a look at this, this is a wind vector map where you're only seeing winds which are anomalous, in other words, different from normal. And we have driven a very strong wind in the upper layers of the atmosphere. This is our westerly wind belt, just straight through this part of Western Australia, and it's exited over here in Queensland. And those very, very strong westerly winds have been a part of a major drop in the southern annular mode. Now, in our scientific literature, we often call it the Antarctic Oscillation, but it's the same thing as the southern annular mode. And what you notice here is that really since mid-July, it has just bottomed out. And you can kind of follow a longer trajectory of this dropping over time. And there's little bumps up, but really if you go back to April, and just look at the trajectory of the southern annular mode, it's just been decreasing with time. It's had little interludes where it's popped up, but overall that's been the case. Now I'm telling you this because any long-range forecast I'm about to share with you is going to have this bit of information kind of in the initialization of any forecast, meaning that models are often very susceptible to where they start, and they like to just keep what they've had. And we call that a persistence bias, but sometimes persistence is the right way to go. So keep that stuffed away in the back of your mind. I'm going to show you the result of this in the month of July so far. This is the map I show you every time. It is the rainfall anomalies measured in millimeters. So these are differences from normal. And this is what the first 28 days of July have looked like. And where we've driven that flow across Australia, we've actually been able to get moisture in places which we typically don't get in strong negative southern annular mode situations, which is here in the interior, getting into parts of Queensland, New South Wales, parts of Victoria, especially down along the coast, and right in through this part of South Australia, and at times in and around this very productive region that kind of surrounds this section of South Australia. Pockets of Western Australia have been extremely wet. And as you follow the coast, according to BOM's data, there are still some areas that are anomalously dry on the month. I wanted to back this up with a couple of other maps, and the first one's going to be the newest root zone soil moisture map. And this again is satellite based. I'm still waiting on BOM to kind of get their root zone soil moisture data working. It doesn't seem to work for me on the web for some reason, so I'm just going to use Grace and rely on it for a while. But what's most important about this pattern is that we have seen in pockets some improvement in drought. So when we get the newest data, which will come out early in August of the drought monitor, so notice that this one only has data on it through June. When you begin a new month, of course, you get the new data. I do expect to see improvements in some key growing areas that have lately seen some better moisture. And this is putting together, several days in a row of wetter conditions, especially in parts of Western Australia that have really needed to get that moisture in place. So oftentimes I take you to this website, and I want to show you a better way to use it today. We use in atmospheric sciences and in agriculture this value called the NDVI, the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. I know a lot of you are very familiar with it. And what the NDVI is it's a measurement of the difference between incoming red light that bounces off of crop and incoming infrared light and the near infrared that bounces off of the crop and goes back to the satellite. Now what we can do with that is we can take the difference, and I want to show you a better way to use this site. So I've left you on it for a few moments. I'm going to put the link in the email but also in the comments here. But what you need to do when you go here is the first thing I want you to do is click on admin level 1. So you see how that put all the countries and boundaries and all that kind of good stuff in there. Next, I want you to slide down here to where it says crop mask and click global, the little plus sign next to it. And then click this top radio button called Esri Sentinel-2 Crops. This is a satellite-derived crop mask. So what it just did for the whole world is now identify the areas where we have major bread baskets. So here's the central U.S. There's Europe into Western Russia. You can see China's bread basket here. You can see the one in South America and Argentina. And then if we come over to Australia and zoom in, we can see these prime areas where crop are grown. And this is what I want to spend a moment doing here. When you come over to this, you can click on any one of, Western Australia, or you can click on New South Wales. But when you click on it, it's going to give you a time series. Now we got to be careful with this. It only shows an 8-month by default. So let's click on this and have it show you a 12-month. Now what you're going to see here in red is the current year, 2023 into 2024. The black line is the average from 2001 to 2021. And then the gray shading is the min and max over that time period. Let's go ahead and toss on last year as well, 2022. And I want to show you the difference between last year and this year. Now remember, even though it's got the entirety of Western Australia highlighted, we are only computing this for, let me just click it off, we're only computing the NDVI for the cropland, so it's masked. And what we see when we get this back up here again is that right now, and I understand, here we are going into the month of August, we have got the highest NDVI values. Let me rephrase that. We've had higher NDVI values than average and certainly last year. Let's keep going through it. How about South Australia? Now, South Australia, this has been one of our bigger drought regions, and compared to a year ago, the NDVI values are lower. Let's go from there and just select Victoria. Right on average, but below where we were a year ago. Let's go up to New South Wales. We are well above average and well above a year ago. Okay, see this? And let's go from here up to Queensland. And Queensland has been very, very high throughout much of this, cooler season here. And right now, much higher than it was a year ago. And we can also go to Tasmania and just have a quick look. Oh, I got to slide up so I'm not clicking on words there. There you go. And in Tasmania, we are right here below average, where a year ago we made a pretty big spike up at this point. But I find this to be a very, very instructive tool, and you can actually click on all of them. If you just want to say, well, give me an idea on Australia's NDVI, and we are technically just a hair above where we were a year ago when you put all these areas kind of together. Now, this is just a tool you can bookmark and click on the radio buttons the same way I did and make the adjustments, and you can check your region out at any given time that you want to. And I just encourage that, and just want to let you know you can actually go down again to another admin layer. If I can zoom this out, maybe it doesn't have it for Australia. I'm sorry. So we have to keep it at admin level 1. But again, just a great resource and tool for you all to be using as the season goes on. All right. From here, let's talk about recent temperatures, because I spent a little bit of time on precipitation. Let's go to temperatures. This is what the last couple of weeks have looked like when you look at the departures from normal. We've been cooler across the north, and at times near normal to warmer than normal in this part of Western Australia and pretty far south here along our southern coast into Tasmania. Now, what's interesting about this is we looked last time at some frost threat at certain given points, but overall, when you just look at the last couple of weeks, that's what our temperatures have done. As we think about where this is going to go, I got to come back to this main idea about the southern annular mode. And so this is using the new European artificial intelligence forecasting system, and it's giving you a 15-day average of the trough and ridge pattern. Now, remember, troughs have low pressure, they're colder. The winds are fastest on the northern side of the troughs when you're thinking about the southern hemisphere, which means what I'm tracing out with this black line is the position of where we expect the jet stream level winds to be moving. And what's amazing about this is that the jet stream is almost one massive unbroken kind of circumpolar wind that's literally going from the Pacific through the Atlantic, through the Indian Ocean, and finishing in the Pacific again. And our jet stream right now is quite powerful, and it's very strong, and it's all reflective of that very negative southern annular mode we're dealing with. In fact, if you're curious, I decided to do this for Perth. If you want to know where the wind well above your heads, up in the jet stream level. Okay, if you look at the jet stream level winds, high thin clouds wisping up real deep in the atmosphere. 10 days ago, follow the back trajectories. They were here. So literally 10 days ago, they had just left New Zealand, were working their way over towards South America, came across the South Atlantic, went south of Africa. Some of the winds bridged to the north here towards Madagascar. Some of them went down to Antarctica, came back together, and that's where they came from. So this is just a way we can trace the trajectory, but to see that far of a trace means that these winds are really screaming. Now, here's another way to look at it. This is just, right now. This is wind speed measured in nautical miles per hour at the jet stream level. And they are just this continuous, unbroken flow that runs all the way around the southern hemisphere of the United States. Very, very impressive to see that. And what do we notice over the next 10 days? There's not a lot of change in it. The winds are still remaining quite strong. They're entering in Western Australia, exiting over in parts of New South Wales and Queensland, and the speeds are strong. So what's going to happen here is that we're going to be paying attention to the individual weather events that are coming on this strong zonal, that means west to east flowing jet stream pattern. I keep bringing up the southern annular mode, but if you're unfamiliar, this is what typically happens. Baum put together a fantastic summary of this. In winter, when you have the positive southern annular mode, what you tend to be is wetter here and drier in these areas. But we are in the negative phase, which means we're getting increased dry flow from the interior. Stronger winds are moving their way farther to the north. In fact, they're much farther to the north than this. They're way up here. And that's starting to alter this particular precipitation pattern over the next 15 days. And I want to show you what it's doing. So here we go. Throughout the day on Monday, getting into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, where do you see the strongest winds? Well, that's what's color shaded. We have winds up here that are approaching 170 knots. I mean, they're screaming about 6 miles above your head. And they're just going straight across and unbroken all the way through the beginning of August. And what this is doing, in fact, at times we're expecting these winds to be approaching 200 nautical miles per hour above our heads. And that's going to drive weather systems across Australia. But it's the trajectory of these winds, which I think you all know very well, that determines who gets the rain and who doesn't. So over the next 10 days, this is the newest data from the European model. And what it's showing us here is precipitation anomalies measured in millimeters. What we are getting out of this particular flavor of the southern annular mode is now drier conditions starting in Adelaide, into Victoria, into parts of New South Wales, and even sections of Queensland, while we see much wetter conditions at times hitting Western Australia. Now, we could get some of this moisture in toward this part of South Australia, but overall, most of the wetter conditions are going to be focused here in Western Australia. Notice how New Zealand is expected to be quite wet as well. We'll talk more about that in just a few seconds. Here's the other part of this pattern. In other words, why are we drier here? If you look in the upper levels of the atmosphere, there's a lot of suppression in this part of the upper atmosphere. In other words, there's kind of a lid on it. And it kind of splits Australia with it's also wetter, but better rising motion here and more sinking motion. And that's the next 5 days, day 5 through 10. Maybe we spread a bit more of that around, but we still have to understand if this can outdo the strong jet stream level winds. But if you're just curious why the east is looking drier than the west, some of the dryness in the east is due to upper level suppression coming out of the tropics in that area as well. Here's what it looks like if you go to those Hofmuller diagrams I love to show you. So this is today going through the next 15 days. And if you notice, can you see Australia, just the northern tip of it right here? Look at this line. If you're on this side of it, which is here in the Indian Ocean, good rising motion. If you're on this side of it, where we have the warm colors, more sinking motion in the atmosphere. And I think that's what's driving the west versus east precipitation pattern in addition to those strong jet stream level winds. So let's finally get into the model. As we play this forward, we have a deep low forming on Monday that's down here pretty far to the south, and another one that's moving toward New Zealand. High pressure lives over parts of southeastern Australia here, but we're going to start to watch rain coming in as early as Monday night into Tuesday into Western Australia. The big front kind of clears through on Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, according to the models, while a low continues to sit and spin here just off of New Zealand's kind of northwest coast. But you take note of the frontal boundary that's sweeping through the day on Thursday. See how it kind of sweeps right over this part of South Australia, and could deliver some lighter rain there. But throughout much of the next 5 to 7 days, limited chances for precipitation in parts of Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland. So we're going to get some precipitation, but limited overall in the total amounts. Then we take a little break as we go through the rest of the weekend into early next week. And then again, there's another system coming through after that. See, this is what happens when you keep that jet stream level wind just cranked. And I'm going to be honest, out there around August 7th, 8th, 9th, the next one that comes through here has really caught my attention. It might be significantly deeper than some of the ones we've seen as of late. We just need to see how well the models are representing that going forward. So if we add it all up, this is total accumulated precipitation from the European operational run going out through the next 10 days. So we do have places in Western Australia which lately have been wet. We do have places here that could pick up another anywhere between 20 and some places maybe over 60 millimeters of rainfall. A couple of locations along the coast could get that. Some wetter conditions in the interior, but not growing a lot of crop here, of course. And if we're going to stay wetter, it's likely going to be closer to our southern coast. So that's your 10-day outlook on total precip. As we go out there into week 2, the models aren't picking up on really strong signals except for that event that I mentioned right here that's coming around the 7th, 8th, 9th, somewhere in that time frame. That's where we again have a big push for the chance for some wetter than normal conditions. The temperatures are going to respond something like this. Over the next 5 days, we're much cooler than average across parts of, across parts of South Australia, Victoria, Queensland, and New South Wales. Take a look at Queensland. Some places there might be averaging 5 to 8 degrees C cooler than average over the next 5 days. As we slide this out to day 5 through 10, this is that large system I'm keeping an eye on, again, around the 7th, 8th, 9th, that's going to sweep through and drive a front that's going to really knock these temperatures back in this area. As we play out there farther, though, all the way out, let's go all the way out to day 10 through 15, which gets us to August 12th. We start to see some more mild air moving into this area behind that big system, several days behind it, but in the day 10 through 15 outlook, which gets us out there again to the 12th, we're going to see some more mild air behind this. So all of that kind of brings me to a bigger picture. Remember earlier I said sometimes models have major initialization bias. In other words, where they start, they just want to keep going. This is what August is looking like in the models. And that, is the same location where there's been much lower pressure, deeper troughs of low pressure that have lived here. And in the month of August, this goes all the way up to September 1st, the models are predicting that to be there again. And in the upper levels of the atmosphere, they're predicting, let's look at it this way. There you go. A deeper trough of low pressure. So you can say, what's that going to do? It's going to drive a stronger wind in this direction, like it's been doing for the month of July. So the models right now are seemingly stuck a bit on persistence. So what does it end up giving us? Well, over the next 30 days, we see wetter conditions possibly here, a little bit into the interior, but drier, slightly drier, just like it's forecast to be over the next 10 days or so. So see how the models are kind of hung up on that being maybe the highest chance overall probability. And if I stretch it out to 46 days, this gets us all the way to mid-September, they're keeping that active storm track here on stronger jet stream level winds there, and therefore we're getting a drier look for the east and South Australia as well. How well does BOM agree with this? Well, this is their outlook for the month of August. Let's move that up so we can see it a bit better here. That's their 1 month outlook for August. And we're in agreement about this, but they're going a bit more aggressive on a wetter pattern moving into this area. And I can see that happening. All it takes is a very slight adjustment in the southern angular mode to get better flow in this area and start to return some moisture. Or we just take the lid off of the atmosphere by moving that MJO around. Remember we talked about that a few moments ago. If you get those things to happen, we'll shift this up a bit too. But you've probably noticed that so far up to this point, I've not mentioned anything about La Nina. And this isn't being controlled by La Nina. In fact, if you wanted to say that, what would a typical La Nina be doing right now? It would not be doing this with the southern annular mode. That's not the way that it typically behaves. So what's going on with our ocean temperatures? Well, lately we have been getting some more kind of tendrils of cooler water that have shown up here. And, they're finally getting over into that Nino region 3.4. And we have seen the ocean temperatures drop down a bit. But overall, from May into June and now into July, while we have this downward trajectory, which we're expecting, it's not been this complete collapse through INSO-neutral straight into La Nina. And we want to know when and where we're going to be finally getting that. And I'm going to make a case by looking at one specific modeling suite, which is the most aggressive on La Nina here in just a few moments. But we need to see that right now we're not there. We're still technically INSO-neutral. Now, here's what needs to keep happening. Again, this is today and over the next 15 days. And you see this blue shading in here? This represents where we're having this, what we call an easterly wind burst. And we need easterly wind bursts. If they come through and they come through with regularity and routine, then what happens is we build in La Nina conditions and they stick around. But this has just been one of, I think, 2 that I've seen of this kind of size and proportion. And we'll have to wait to see what this does to, for example, the Southern Oscillation Index. Because you go all the way back to May of 2022, that was the last time we had a La Nina, and you notice from May 2022 to February 2023, our Southern Oscillation Index was very high. We then saw it collapse, right? And this was this kind of odd and weak El Nino that we dealt with. And where are we now? We're at the end of this. And we're still not yet seeing the Southern Oscillation Index trying to make this race up. But as soon as it starts to go up, that will be an indication that these easterly wind bursts, they're coming out of the east, are becoming much more consistent. We will likely see with this one, the Southern Oscillation Index going positive and starting to crank up. But it's got to stay there for a long time for me to really make a call that we're going full on into La Nina. Now, just as a reminder, BOM is not calling for La Nina yet. Their modeling suggests that they're going to be in INSO-neutral all the way through December. So, I mean, through your spring, into summer, they're calling for, this to be neutral. What's interesting is their forecast is being echoed by the Europeans. As we've so often done, we compare BOM's forecast to the Canadians, the Europeans, the Japanese, the French, the United States, and the British. And going from August to September, into October, November, and December, look who's most aggressive on predicting La Nina. It's NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration out of my country, the United States. And they've been very aggressive on this for a while the Europeans and BOM are much, much less kind of bullish on the arrival of La Nina. Now, what do you do with this? We look at it as a source of uncertainty. But in this video, I'm going to paint you a picture that would say, what if? What if instead of the European model or BOM being right, which is the weaker of the 2 events, the weaker 2 forecasts of all 7 of these, okay? What if NOAA's right? What's the difference? Well, here's the difference. This is NOAA's official forecast. I'm going to show you 2 graphics here. This forecast is made in our Climate Prediction Center, and we care just as much about El Nino and La Nina as y'all do. Now, as you look at this forecast is made using both computer models and human forecasters. We tend to trust human forecasters because of intuition and experience, training, and just notice that over July, August, September, October, take a look. We're expecting by October, November, December to be almost at about an 80, 81, 82% chance of having La Nina be the most dominant factor. So when you bring in the humans into the forecast, they're saying much smaller chance of INSO-neutral, no chance of El Nino, biggest chance, better than 80% La Nina. If you only use the models, though, take a look over here. The models are suggesting, what do we look at? October, November, December? Well, there it is. The models are suggesting about a 52% chance of La Nina and a 42% chance of neutral. Now, they're not calling for El Nino, but the modeling here is much less aggressive. Now, I bring that up because that forecast you see there, that is from our human forecasters at NOAA. The European model, there's no humans in here. This is just the model output. I don't know what BOM does. It appears that they're just using their modeling. You got to read through this very carefully to see what they're using when they make this forecast. But I believe most of this is based upon forecast modeling, not their own meteorologist interpretation. Now, we can get more of that information if you go to Overview and see what they're on the lookout for. But notice, they're just in the first category here of La Nina watch. So this is what needs to be paid attention to as we go forward. Now, I made the case a moment ago that I'm going to show you what happens if we stick with the case of aggressive building in of La Nina like NOAA is using. And this is what their models are suggesting. August, September, October, very high probability of being wet. Not just in Australia, but in Indonesia. Wet in Asia, big sections of India and China. Very dry in parts of South America, which we're going to talk more about in a few moments. But you see, they're very aggressively going over wet for you. What if we go out there to September, October, November? We look at that forecast, remains wet. In fact, they're picking up on a drier signal in parts of Western Australia, but very wet through the majority of Australia up toward Indonesia. Take a look at South America. I'll come back to that again in a few seconds. October, November, December, still wet. November, December, January, still wet. You see, this is how the models are going to respond. They're going to push all the best rising motion in the world here and take it away from parts of South America, parts of Mexico and the central United States, parts of this section of the Middle East. It's all stuck in this desperate attempt to go to equilibrium, and where you put the air rising, it's got to sink somewhere else. So this is what one of the models, which is most aggressive, says you're going to get if we get full La Nina. Next time we talk, we're going to get into this model, though, the ECMWF, because when we talk next, it will be the only new one that's been released, and I'll be very curious to see what it's projecting going forward. So again, I want to show you one other complementary feature to this. The newest forecast from the Japanese, this is one other forecast, is, let's slide down here and have a look at it. They are also projecting that through August into October, strong La Nina features showing up. They're showing much stronger trade winds. See the trade winds really screaming here? And as a result, what have they done? They've predicted that most of Australia is going to be on the wetter side of average with higher precipitation rates. Again, the time frame, August, September, and October. That is very similar to what you just saw. Let's go back to it from the IRI multi-model probability forecast system. Now, just because we're thinking about it, let's go out there and look at the 3-month from BOM. That's BOM's forecast, August to October. You see, with the much less aggressive arrival of La Nina, they're drier in a big area here, but there's still better chance of being wetter in and around Perth and throughout much of the growing areas in the east and in the south. So we're going to have to sit and wait, because what I'm waiting on is just to see how these ocean temperatures respond to the stronger trade winds. Now, in the meantime, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Everything is being dominated by the fact we've got this, very negative southern annular mode. And that's what we focused on at the beginning of this. But I want to give you that longer range outlook. Okay, you want to stick around? I'm going to give you a little bit of information on some international weather. I'm going to start here in the United States where I live. This is what our month of July has looked like. Now, July for much of the U.S. is mission critical. It's critical for our cotton across the south, our corn and beans in the heart of our breadbasket. It's also very important for the western U.S., especially with respect to wildfire smoke. And all the wet weather you see riding through here, we had a hurricane named Beryl that came into Texas and finished in Canada. We had very wet weather in our southeast as well. Now, as you think about this, though, this has also come with a tremendous amount of severe weather. And I live right in through here. And back, 2 weeks ago, we had a storm system that ripped out of Iowa and Illinois. Iowa is the #1 corn-producing state in the United States. It's #2 for soybeans. Illinois is #1 for soybeans, #2 for corn. And we just had a strong wind system that rolled through with winds approaching 100 miles an hour. And one of our employees, Justin Yepson, took this picture for us, showing the damage we had from what we call a derecho. That's a Spanish word for straight, and it refers to strong straight-line winds. The winds actually didn't lay this corn down. It rolled a bin over the top of this. We've been dealing with so much severe weather throughout the heart of our kind of main growing areas, including some huge hail events. July alone gave us 205 tornadoes. We're already on the year. Let's go look at it. On the year, we've had 1,490 tornadoes in the United States. It's been one of our busiest severe weather years on record. Now, temperature-wise, we've been cool, which is why we've not gotten any good price reaction in these major markets of corn and soybeans. Because if it's cool in July in this area, and we have got plenty of water, which is what I showed you here, it's wetter overall in our main breadbasket, then the crop is responding well. And I'd love for you all to come see what the crops look like in my home county of Champaign County in Illinois. Corn, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. You should just come see what it looks like, the corn and soybeans here. But we've been wet and we've been cool and the crop looks amazing. It's been extremely hot in our western United States. And just today, take a look at this satellite animation. This is the very end of our day on Sunday. That's the sunset there. And all of this throughout our west is wildfire smoke. We've burned over 4 million acres in the United States. Most of these started by lightning here in the western U.S. And Canada's had some huge wildfires as well in northern Alberta. If you want to see what this looks like, let me just take you to the west here. Look at a good zoomed in view. Huge fires right now in Northern California. One of the largest fires in U.S. history was in Oregon earlier this week. And that's what we've been dealing with. It's been pretty rough in the west with excessive heat. Over the next 10 days, see this corridor in through here? That is some of the most productive ground in the U.S. for corn and soybeans. This goes right over our Mississippi River and our Ohio River and our Missouri River, which comes in like that. And we're expecting some more nasty storms out of this, while the central U.S., where we grow a lot of cotton and wheat, corn, beans, is going to be scorched. Days of 40 degrees C highs with evaporation rates over 3 inches is going to be quite nasty. We're watching a hurricane that's likely to form and come toward our southeast. Okay, elsewhere around the world, over the last 30 days, very wet weather north of the Yangtze finally. We've gotten much drier south of it. This hit Shandong province very hard, and there's the remnants of a typhoon going over this right now. But better rains are coming for the North China Plain and the Manchurian Plain, two very productive regions agriculturally in China. The Indian monsoon has come on in fits and starts, but it's really made big moves. Very wet conditions in through here, spotty throughout their main cotton growing area. The Ganges River Valley has gone off and on with big time rains, but currently they're expecting some pretty heavy precipitation to butt up against the Himalayan mountains. But what I want to show you on this one is Ukraine and the Western Russian grain belt. Still quite hot and quite dry over the last 30 days. And going back to that same tool I showed you earlier, I've selected Eastern Ukraine and Western Russia, and I want to show you that for their summer crops, NDVI values are at the lowest they've been in the last 20 plus years. And that just continues to be a significant concern in this area. Now, I don't even remember it because it was about 20 minutes ago, but I mentioned to you I wanted to talk about South America. South America, tomorrow, on Monday for me, I'm going to go talk to a group of Brazilian growers. And some of these Brazilian growers, let me just slide this up here if I can. They farm right down here in this state called Mato Grosso do Sul, and Goiás. There are going to be a couple of the guys I talk to tomorrow that own themselves. One guy I know in particular, he's part owner of a 500,000 hectare operation in Mato Grosso do Sul. And what they want to know is the same thing you all want to know. What is La Nina going to do? Because unlike Australia, where we tend to have a west versus east bias when it comes to La Nina and precipitation, South America has a north versus south. And when you correlate September to November, those critical spring rains, much of central and southern Brazil getting into Argentina tend to struggle with dry conditions. And this could be very critical for the wheat that's grown in Argentina. If we do not get good moisture into that area soon, as we get toward their spring, which is the critical time, we could be talking about dry conditions and poor wheat quality. A year ago, you could flip this over. We were in El Nino, it was dry north and wet south, and that's exactly what happened. So they tend to split things north-south. So big questions I'm going to get grilled on tomorrow, translated from Portuguese, of course, will be, is this what's expected this year? Because I'm not sure if you've heard, but many places here in Brazil have been given the green light to plant soybeans 15 days earlier than they're normally allowed to plant. So on September 1 rather than September 15. And that's critical. It's all about the start of their season. Okay, I've rambled on long enough. Thank you for giving me a couple of extra days here. We'll get right back on our normal schedule for the next video update. Take care and we'll talk soon. Thanks.